Hello there, thrill seekers. See my new shirt? Son of Godzilla. That's Minya there. Pretty cool. And just yet another reminder, I'll be in Europe starting like in 11 days. And here are the dates. I'm going to Finland, Germany, and England. And if you want more info, you can find clickable links at the URL hardcorezen.info/events. All right, let's talk about things. I got a question in the emails, and as you know, since your sun before her burned hot, no, wait a minute. Since before your sun burned hot in space and before your race was born, I have awaited a question. So here's the question. It is: I have dabbled with meditation for most of my life. I'm 31, but I have been practicing Zazen daily for over a year now. I participated in a Vipassana retreat as well, had some interesting experiences, but realized that Zazen just makes sense for me. My question is, what is the difference between being lost in thought and observing thought? I can recognize thought and go back to breathing, but then that feels like I'm interrupting thought and trying to do something about it. Is observing thought that moment of recognition and not moving anywhere, just being still, not even going back to the breath? I feel like there is a fine line between that and just being lost in it. So it's an interesting question to me because this whole notion of observing thought as part of your meditation practice, this was something neither of my two Zen teachers ever talked about that I can remember. And never said to observe your thoughts. I only came across it later reading like different Buddhist magazines or whatever, or just hearing stuff here and there, but it never came from my teachers. So I don't know what is meant when people say observing thought. The closest I ever heard from either of my teachers to anything like observe your thoughts, please observe your thoughts, or observe your thoughts during Zazen, closest I ever heard to that was my first teacher told me once that if I was particularly bothered by thinking, like incessant thoughts and whatever, I could just stop it by kind of saying to myself, thinking, which was, I think, a fairly good little piece of advice because it got me to gradually realize that my thoughts are just thoughts. Like, it doesn't matter. The content of the thought doesn't really matter that much. Occasionally, you might think of something good during your meditation practice, during your zazen, and maybe that's nice, but most of the time it's just random stuff. It's like Kosho Uchiyama said, and I think he says this in Opening the Hand of Thought. I'm not sure which book this is in, probably that one. But he says the thoughts are just like the secretions of your brain, the same way stomach juices are the secretion of your stomach, which I think is a good way to look at it. Your stomach is down there in your belly, right underneath of Minya, the son of Godzilla, doing its thing. Day in, day out. It's doing its thing right now because I just ate a pretzel just before I did this video. And I'm not paying much attention to what my stomach is doing with that pretzel. I just trust that the stomach is doing its thing and it's gonna digest that pretzel, and then it'll do what it wants with the pretzel. It'll decide which parts are good and which parts are bad and so forth and so on. It doesn't really concern me intellectually. But the brain is the same kind of thing. The brain is just an organ in your body, and it has a job to do. And the job that it does is analyze things that have gone on. But most of the time, the random work it's doing isn't worth paying attention to. Yet, we as human beings are kind of socialized and conditioned to always be paying attention to what's going on in that particular organ. So we just get really obsessed with it, probably because a certain amount of paying attention to what's going on in your thought has been useful to our species. I'm watching Ziggy right now, and he's very interested in some sound he's hearing that I am not hearing. So he's looking around. Let's see if we can see him. He's looking around, trying to figure out what's going on with that sound. What is going on with that sound? Is there something? You hear something? Anyway, he's doing what he does as an animal. He's a dog. And part of what dogs do is they protect the place that they live, and they're very useful to human beings because they hear sounds that we can't hear, and they smell smells that we can't smell, and they can act as kind of early warning devices to things. But this is just what a dog does. So that's what they do. They pay attention to their what goes into their noses and what goes into their ears, I suppose. But we humans have been very successful by paying attention to the random stuff that goes on in our brains. It allows us to create things like the machine that you're using to watch this video on, this very sophisticated machine. I don't know if it's one you hold in your hand or one you sit on your lap or one that's sitting on your desk if you're really, still have one of those. I kind of wish I still had my desktop computer because there were a lot of things it did that the laptop doesn't do. Anyway, sorry. Anyway, we've been very successful at that, but what we are being asked to do in Zazen is to let go of that. Now, one of the best places to find out what Dogen says about that is it appears in Shobogenzo Volume 1 in the Nishijima Cross Edition, and it's called Fukan Zazengi, or the Universal Guide to the Standard Method of Zazen. And this is one of Dogen's greatest hits. So if you can't get a hold of, you can get this on Amazon, I know for sure, as a print on demand right now. But if you don't want, and it's also, I'll see if I can put the link. You can also get it as a free download these days. But if you can't find this one, or you don't want to find this one, it's probably one of Dogen's greatest hits is Fukan Zazengi. So any book about Dogen that provides anything of his work almost always includes Fukan Zazengi, and one such book, let me toot my own horn here and advertise my own stuff, is Don't Be a Jerk by Brad Warner. I was thinking today or the other day that I don't know how many of my viewers know that I write books. I write a lot of books, and this is one of my good ones. I think they're all good, but anyway, I just had a read of my version of Fukan Zazengi this morning to prepare for this video, and I really liked it. I mean, there's some choices I made that I think are kind of stupid in chasing jokes. One of the things I wanted to do was make this kind of funny. So there's a couple of jokes stuck in here that I kind of go, ugh. But, it's fine because in the little explanation that follows, I explain all the jokes and what it really says in the original Japanese, so you're not just stuck with the jokes. But my version is called How to Sit Down and Shut Up. So Sit Down and Shut Up was the title of my second book, and Fukan Zazengi is his version of Sit Down and Shut Up. Is the reason I called the book Sit Down and Shut Up is because I think that's the basic idea of Zazen. So is just sit down and shut up. Now, in Fukan Zazengi, Dogen spends a great deal of time. He starts out with this I'm not going to read the whole thing for you. You can go find it yourself. But he starts out with this kind of very philosophical introduction. And after, let's see, 3 or 4 paragraphs, depending on how you parse it out, of being philosophical, then he gets down to brass tacks, as we say in America. He kind of gets into what we should do while we're doing Zazen. So most of this is spent explaining what to do physically. Let me read a bit of it for you. Therefore, we should cease the intellectual work of studying sayings and chasing words. We should learn the backward step of turning light and reflecting. That's an interesting phrase. Maybe we'll talk about it. Body and mind will naturally fall away, and the original features will manifest themselves before us. If we want to attain the matter of the ineffable, we should practice the matter of the ineffable at once. And then he gets into, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4... 4.5, let's say, paragraphs of just the physical posture, of just how to do the physical posture. He says, choose a quiet room, food and drink should be in moderation, give the myriad things a rest, do not think of good and bad, do not consider right or wrong, don't judge your zazen, that's one thing. Stop the driving movement of mind, will, and consciousness. Cease intellectual consideration through images, thoughts, and reflections. So that's kind of what he says about thinking. And then he says, spread a thick mat on the place where you'll sit in either the full or half lotus posture, go back and forth to kind of find your balance. Don't lean to the left, don't lean to the right. The ears must be aligned with the shoulder, the nose with the navel. Hold the tongue against the palate, very specific. Keep the lips and teeth closed, keep the eyes open, breathe softly through the nose. Then he says, now here's the main thing he says about what did I say? Observing thought. I mean, he doesn't say anything about observing thought. The closest he comes is he says, sit immovably in the mountain still state. Think about this concrete state beyond thinking. How can the state beyond thinking be thought about? It is different from thinking. This is just the pivot of Zazen. And then he says, this sitting in Zazen is not learning Zen concentration. It is simply the peaceful and joyful gait of the Dharma. So he doesn't really tell you a whole lot of detailed advice about what to do with what's going on in your brain. He's just telling you, think the thought of non-thinking. It's different from thinking. And I've said this probably in a dozen videos by now, but I'll say it again. The two words he uses, think the thought of not thinking, first he says fushiryo, and shiryo means consideration more than it means thinking. So it means more like deliberate thinking rather than just, images pop up in your mind at random. So he's saying fushiryo. And the fu is a kind of, not exactly a weak negation, but a kind of a not thinking. And then when the person asks, the unknown person says, how can you think the thought of non-thinking? He says, hishiryo. So the he is a very strong negation. It's like the ill in illegal or the im in immoral. It's like, yeah, it's definitely not thinking. It's so not thinking. And what I said in this book, which I actually was rereading and going, oh, I kind of like what I said in this book, so, sue me. I like what I wrote. He says, or what I said was, you can say that thinking the thought of non-thinking is still a kind of thinking, but it's a different kind of thinking. What I interpreted to mean is that when I find myself ruminating or cogitating or considering something, I just go, oh, I'm doing that again, and then I try my best to drop it. And there's a lot going on. It's like a big window opens up. It's kind of interesting in that I feel like when I'm thinking, everything narrows down to just this like concentration on the activity of the brain. And then when I notice that I'm thinking and decide to drop it, it's like, whew, the curtains open up and there's a whole universe out there for me to experience that has nothing to do with thinking. So, this is going to happen, though. You can't achieve this state of perfect non-thinking constantly. And the example that I used in this book that I really liked is I wrote about going to Munich, which I'm going to in a few weeks. Again, I go to Munich almost every year. Munich is sort of my starting point when I travel to Benediktushof, which is like 3 hours drive from Munich, but Munich makes a convenient place to start off from. And in Munich, there is a river called the Eisbach, which means the ice river. And it is famous for its surfers. So I don't know why. In fact, I've asked people there and nobody seems to know why, but there's something kind of underneath the surface of the water where this bridge goes over it that causes a standing wave. And I don't know how many years ago, probably a long, long time ago, people discovered that this was a good place to surf. Like Munich is landlocked and there's no beach, there's no ocean there. But you can go to this river and you can surf on this standing wave. And this standing wave, because it's a standing wave, is perhaps a bit more predictable than a wave on an ocean might be. It's probably as close as you can get to a predictable sort of wave. But even so, I've sat there and watched surfers, sat there like for an hour watching different people surf on it, and I've seen some good ones and some bad ones. But even the best ones can't stay on that standing wave for more than a few seconds. I've never timed it, but I'm guessing a minute would be an amazing amount of time to be able to stay on this wave. And then they just crash and they fall over. And that's what it kind of feels like when I'm doing Zazen. Like I'm sitting there and I'm trying to kind of hold on to this state of not thinking and not get lost in thoughts. But, after a while, the thoughts come up and the habit reasserts itself to start paying attention to one of those thoughts. And before I know it, I'm kind of going, oh, what about, this thing on the TV show last night I saw, and why did that guy do that thing, and why did he get arrested again? Because I thought he was arrested for that thing before, and now whatever it is. I'm just trying to give an example. I've been watching Your Honor on it's a Netflix show. Anyway, so you just think of these things and you get lost in it, and then you notice you're getting lost in it and you drop it. And then you keep dropping it for a little while, and then you notice again something bubbles up and it catches your attention, and you get lost in it again, and you come back. It's like the surfers. You just keep riding the wave as long as you can, and then you fall off. And it's no shame that you fell off, because the nature of the thought and the nature of how we were all socialized to pay so much attention to it makes you get lost in it. It makes you get caught up in it. So you just get back on again and try it again. And you try it again and you try it again. And my own experience, just in case you wonder what happens after 40-some, maybe, oh God, it's been a long time. At least 40 years of doing this stuff. It gets better. It gets a little better. My early zazen's were just like, oh my God, And after a few years, it got better. It never gets perfect though, and I don't think it'll ever get perfect. That's just the nature of the thing that you're dealing with. But as far as observing thought, I don't observe the thought. I don't know. Maybe what they mean when they say observing thought is kind of be a passive observer to thought. Let thought go on, and you're just kind of above it, paying attention to the fact that it's going on. I don't know. I really don't know, and I don't. That's just why I don't use that phrase, and why I don't really like using the phrase, it just seems like bad instructions. It just, but it's hard to give good instructions for this because it's so different from what we're used to doing. So there you go. Don't observe your thoughts. Just let them go. Let them pass. And if you can't let them pass, then you go, I'm doing it again, and then start letting them pass again. And you might only get a few seconds on that little wave, but that's good. And eventually you might get a minute on that wave, and it'll be great, which means that if you're doing a 30-minute sitting, maybe 10 minutes of the 30-minute sitting, if you get really good, might be that kind of serene state of non-thinking. But, if you can't get 30 full minutes, it doesn't matter. What occurs during your zazen has a lot to do with the state that you're in when you go to start doing it. And if you've been thinking a lot, if you've been arguing with your spouse, if you've been watching a really interesting show about the election or something like that, or looking at Twitter or some stupid thing like that, it's going to be more frantic. And if you haven't been doing that kind of stuff, it's going to be less frantic, which is just, one of the reasons maybe to stay away from too much of that stuff that excites you if you want to have good zazen. Just a little bit of advice that I give myself all the time. But there you go. So, if you like what you heard and you want to donate to me saying more things like this, you can go to the, links that are in the description below if you're looking at this on YouTube, or if you don't like that, you can go to this URL, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find my PayPal and Patreon links, and that's my main way of making a living. But you don't have to support me if you don't want to support me, so you have that freedom. All right, we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Hey, Ziggy. Did you figure out what that thing is that you were hearing? I don't know. It's probably just a car coming by, huh? All right. Have a nice time on your new bed. Hope you like it. See ya.